There comes a moment in a woman's life when she realizes that what she has walked through was never random. The pain that tried to break her, the silence that confused her, the waiting seasons that tested her faith, all of it begins to make sense when she understands this one truth: she was chosen by God, not because she was perfect, not because life was easy, but because heaven marked her for purpose. Being chosen by God is not about popularity, comfort, or applause. It is about calling, refinement, and destiny. Many women feel different, misunderstood, or out of place, not realizing that these feelings are often evidence of divine selection. God never chooses someone casually. When he chooses a woman, he shapes her life in ways that reveal his hand, even when she does not yet see it. A chosen woman often begins her journey feeling like she does not quite fit in. From an early stage, she may sense that her heart longs for something deeper than what the world offers. While others are satisfied with surface-level living, she feels an inner pull toward meaning, truth, and purpose. This longing is not weakness, it is a sign. God places a holy dissatisfaction inside the women he chooses so they will never settle for less than his best. This dissatisfaction pushes her forward even when she cannot explain why she feels restless. She may try to conform to silence that inner voice, but it always returns, reminding her that she was created for more. Being chosen by God is not about comfort, popularity, or an easy life. It is about purpose. Many women grow up believing that if God is with them, everything should fall into place smoothly. Yet the reality of divine calling looks very different. When God chooses a woman, he does not promise her a path free of obstacles. Instead, he invites her into a life that carries meaning, impact, and eternal value. Purpose always comes before comfort in God's design, because comfort maintains the present, but purpose transforms the future. A woman chosen by God often discovers early that her life does not follow the expected script. While others seem to move effortlessly through seasons of success or stability, she finds herself walking through uncertainty, delay, and challenge. This does not mean she is forgotten or overlooked. It means her life is being shaped for something greater. God is less interested in keeping her comfortable than he is in making her effective. Comfort can make a person complacent, but purpose keeps a woman dependent on God, attentive to his voice and open to growth. Divine purpose requires refinement, and refinement rarely feels pleasant. When God places a calling on a woman's life, he also allows circumstances that stretch her capacity. These experiences develop patience, humility, endurance, and spiritual depth. Without them, purpose would collapse under pressure. God knows exactly what her future requires, so he prepares her accordingly. What feels like disruption is often divine alignment. What feels like loss is often God clearing space for something greater. Many chosen women struggle with the feeling that they must always be strong. They believe that admitting exhaustion or frustration means they are failing God. But purpose does not demand perfection. It demands obedience. God does not choose women because they can handle everything alone. He chooses them so they will learn to rely on him completely. Purpose teaches dependence, not self-sufficiency. It is in moments of weakness that God's strength becomes most evident, reminding her that she was never meant to walk this path alone. Comfort often seeks safety and familiarity, but purpose requires faith. Faith pulls a woman beyond what she understands and into what God has promised. It challenges her to move even when clarity is incomplete. This is why chosen women frequently feel stretched beyond their comfort zones. God invites them to trust his character when they cannot trace his plan. Each step of faith builds spiritual maturity and confidence, not in self, but in God's faithfulness. A woman chosen by God may watch others pursue comfort and feel tempted to do the same. She may wonder why her life requires such surrender, while others seem free to choose ease. But purpose demands a higher level of commitment. God entrusts more to those who are willing to carry more. He does not compare her journey to anyone else's because her assignment is unique. The path may feel lonely at times, but it is intentional. God isolates not to punish, but to protect and prepare. Purpose also brings responsibility. A chosen woman's decisions do not affect her alone. They influence generations, communities, and lives she may never meet. God sees the ripple effect of her obedience long before she does. That is why he trains her heart so carefully. He teaches her integrity when no one is watching, faithfulness in small things, and courage when fear threatens to silence her. Comfort would never teach these lessons, but purpose requires them. Over time, a woman begins to realize that the very things she once prayed to escape were shaping her into who she needed to become. The delays taught her patience. The disappointments taught her discernment. The struggles taught her compassion. She stops asking God to remove the process and starts asking him to reveal what he is building within her. This shift in perspective marks spiritual maturity. She understands that purpose is not a destination, but a continual unfolding of God's will in her life. Being chosen by God also redefines success. Success is no longer measured by applause, recognition, or ease, but by obedience and alignment with God's plan. A woman chosen by God learns to celebrate faithfulness over outcomes. She learns that even when results are not visible, obedience still matters. God values the unseen sacrifices as much as the visible victories. Purpose anchors her when external validation is absent. In time, the woman chosen by God no longer resents the path that lacks comfort. She becomes grateful for it. She sees how God's hand guided her through every season, even the painful ones. She recognizes that comfort would have kept her small, but purpose expanded her faith, her capacity, and her impact. She stands with quiet confidence, knowing her life is not defined by ease, but by divine intention. Being chosen by God is not about living comfortably, it is about living meaningfully, fully surrendered to the purpose for which she was created. When God chooses a woman, our life often becomes marked by unusual levels of pressure and opposition. This is one of the clearest yet most misunderstood signs of divine selection. Many women assume that hardship means they are on the wrong path or that God is displeased with them. In reality, intense resistance often confirms that their life carries purpose. The enemy does not fight what poses no threat. Where there is calling, there will be conflict, and where there is destiny, there will be opposition. A chosen woman frequently feels as though she must push harder just to stand still. Doors seem to close unexpectedly. Relationships break without clear explanation, and opportunities are delayed at the very moment she feels ready. This pressure can feel deeply personal, as if life itself is working against her. Yet God is not absent in these moments. He is present, allowing pressure to shape her endurance and deepen her faith. Pressure exposes what lies beneath the surface and forces growth that comfort never could. Opposition does not arrive by accident. It targets potential. Before a woman even understands her calling, resistance often tries to discourage her identity. She may experience rejection early in life, feel overlooked, or carry wounds from environments that should have nurtured her. These experiences are not random. They are attempts to weaken her confidence before she discovers her strength. The enemy understands that if he can break her belief in herself and in God, he can delay her purpose. But God uses these same moments to build inner resolve. Under pressure, a chosen woman learns the difference between human strength and divine strength. When her own ability reaches its limit, OD's power becomes evident. She realizes she cannot rely on charm, intellect, or effort alone. She must rely on grace. This dependency is not weakness, it is alignment. God never intended his chosen ones to survive by their own strength. He designed pressure to push them into deeper trust and intimacy with him. Pressure also reveals priorities. When life becomes heavy, distractions lose their appeal. The chosen woman begins to focus on what truly matters. She becomes more discerning about relationships, commitments, and influences. Opposition sharpens her vision. It strips away what is unnecessary and highlights what is essential. Through hardship, she learns to value truth over approval and obedience over popularity. These lessons prepare her to carry responsibility without losing integrity. Many chosen women wonder why their battles seem more intense than those around them. They may watch others progress smoothly while they face setback after setback. This comparison can breed frustration and self-doubt. But God never measures calling by comparison. He measures it by capacity. Those called to carry greater influence must develop greater resilience. Pressure builds that resilience layer by layer. Each trial strengthens spiritual muscles that will be needed later. Opposition also refines discernment. Through repeated challenges, a woman learns to recognize spiritual warfare without becoming fearful. She learns to pray with authority, stand firm in truth, and resist discouragement. What once overwhelmed her eventually teaches her how to fight with faith rather than panic. She grows confident not because battles disappear, but because she knows who stands with her. God within her would not break, but rise. Resilience is one of the clearest reflections of God's sustaining power in the life of a chosen woman. It is not something she is born with in fullness, nor is it something she develops overnight. It is formed slowly through repeated moments where giving up would have been easier than pressing forward. When God chooses a woman, he allows her to walk through circumstances that demand endurance, not so she can prove her strength, but so she can discover his strength working within her. A chosen woman often surprises herself by how much she can endure. She experiences loss, disappointment, and seasons where answers do not come quickly. At times, she feels bent under the weight of responsibility or expectation. Yet even when she feels close to breaking, something within her holds. This inner stability is not denial of pain. It is the presence of God anchoring her soul. She may cry, question, and wrestle with doubt, but she does not abandon her faith. Resilience allows her to remain standing even when clarity is absent. God's sustaining power becomes most visible when a woman's own resources are exhausted. When her emotional, mental, or spiritual strength runs low, God steps in as her source. She learns that resilience is not about being unshaken, but about returning to God again and again. Each time she rises from disappointment, her trust deepens. Each time she chooses hope over despair, her faith grows stronger. God uses repetition to build resilience, teaching her that falling does not disqualify her. Refusing to rise does. Resilience also reshapes how a chosen woman views failure. Instead of seeing setbacks as proof that she is incapable, she begins to see them as part of the process. God never wastes pain. What feels like failure is often instruction. Each mistake teaches wisdom. Each delay strengthens patience. Through resilience, she learns to forgive herself, release shame, and continue forward with humility. This ability to move beyond failure without losing confidence is evidence of God's sustaining grace at work. A resilient woman does not harden her heart, she softens it. This is one of the most powerful signs of divine strength. While adversity can make some people bitter, it makes the chosen woman deeper. She learns compassion through suffering. She understands others' pain because she has known her own. God preserves her heart even in harsh seasons, allowing her to remain loving without becoming naive. Her resilience is not built on walls, but on wisdom. As resilience develops, fear begins to lose its control. A chosen woman may still feel afraid, but fear no longer defines her decisions. She has survived enough storms to know that God is faithful. This confidence is not arrogance, it is remembrance. She remembers the time she thought she would not make it, and yet she did. She remembers the prayers that were answered slowly but surely. These memories become fuel for faith, reminding her that God has always carried her through. Resilience also teaches a woman how to wait. Waiting is one of the most difficult disciplines of faith. It requires trust without evidence and patience without timelines. Through repeated seasons of waiting, the chosen woman learns that God's silence does not mean absence. She learns to remain faithful even when progress feels invisible. This kind of endurance cannot be taught in comfort. It is learned through perseverance. Waiting stretches resilience, strengthening her spiritual muscles for future responsibilities. As she matures, the chosen woman realizes that resilience is not self-reliance. She stops striving to appear strong and allows herself to be supported by God and, when appropriate, by others. She understands that vulnerability is not weakness. In fact, it is often the doorway through which God's power flows most freely. When she admits her need, she creates space for divine strength to operate. Over time, resilience transforms her perspective. She no longer views hardship as something to escape at all costs. She sees it as something that will pass, just as it always has. This does not diminish the pain, but it removes its power to define her. She trusts that joy can coexist with sorrow and that hope can survive disappointment. This balanced faith reflects maturity and deep trust in God's character. In the end, resilience stands as living evidence that God has been present all along. Every time the chosen woman rises, it is not because she is unusually strong, but because she is divinely sustained. Her endurance testifies that God's grace is sufficient even when circumstances are not ideal. She becomes a living example that God does not simply deliver his chosen ones from trials. He carries them through them. And in doing so, he shapes women who are not easily shaken, not easily defeated, and never without hope. A defining mark of a woman chosen by God is her deep sensitivity to his voice and presence. This sensitivity does not always appear dramatic or mystical. Often it is quiet, persistent, and deep. Why personal? From early in life, she may sense an inner awareness that guides her choices, convicts her heart, and draws her toward truth. Even before she fully understands faith, she feels when something is not aligned. This awareness is not coincidence. It is God gently shaping her spiritual perception. A chosen woman often struggles to ignore her conscience. When she moves in a direction that is unhealthy or dishonest, an inner discomfort rises. When she steps into truth, even if it costs her, she experiences peace. This sensitivity can feel inconvenient in a world that encourages compromise, but it is a gift. God entrusts spiritual awareness to those he intends to lead, influence, and intercede. Her sensitivity is not emotional weakness. It is spiritual alignment. This awareness makes her life feel different from those around her. While others may move freely without reflection, she feels compelled to pause, pray, and discern. She may wonder why she cannot simply do what everyone else does without inner conflict. The reason is that God has placed a guard over her heart. He protects her by making her sensitive to his presence. This sensitivity keeps her from settling into environments that would dull her spirit or distract her from her calling. A woman chosen by God often hears his voice most clearly in stillness. In moments of quiet, Scripture speaks to her directly. Prayers feel deeply personal, and decisions are guided by inner clarity rather than external pressure. God does not always speak loudly. Often he speaks gently. This requires her to slow down and listen. Over time, she learns that busyness can drown out God's voice, so she begins to value silence as a place of connection rather than emptiness. This sensitivity also heightens her emotional depth. She feels deeply, loves deeply, and grieves deeply. While this can feel overwhelming, it is part of her calling. God often uses emotionally aware women to bring healing and understanding to others. Her empathy allows her to see beneath the surface of people's pain. She notices what others overlook. This ability to feel does not weaken her. It equips her to minister with compassion and wisdom. However, sensitivity must be refined. Without grounding, it can lead to emotional exhaustion or confusion. God teaches the chosen woman to discern between his voice and her own fears. This learning process takes time. She may make mistakes, misinterpret emotions, or struggle with doubt. Yet God remains patient. Each experience sharpens her discernment, teaching her to recognize his peace even in difficult decisions. Sensitivity also draws the chosen woman into repentance and humility. When she falls short, she does not remain comfortable in disobedience. Her heart longs for alignment with God. This does not mean she is perfect. It means she is responsive. She quickly returns to God, not out of fear, but out of relationship. Her sensitivity keeps her connected, preventing her from drifting too far from truth. At times, this awareness isolates her. She may feel misunderstood because she cannot always explain why she chooses differently. Others may label her as overly cautious or too serious. Yet God uses this separation to protect her spirit. Sensitivity to his presence creates a boundary that guards her heart from influences that would compromise her integrity. What feels like limitation is actually preservation. As she matures, the chosen woman learns to trust this inner guidance more fully. She recognizes patterns in how God speaks to her. She notices that when she follows his prompting, even when it is uncomfortable, the outcome brings peace. This builds confidence, not in herself, but in God's faithfulness. She becomes less reactive and more intentional, guided by discernment rather than impulse. Eventually, her sensitivity becomes a source of strength for others. People sense her spiritual depth and are drawn to her counsel. Her words carry clarity because they flow from communion with God. She does not speak to impress, she speaks to edify. Her sensitivity allows her to bring light into confusing situations and calm into chaos. In the end, a woman's sensitivity to God's voice is evidence of relationship, not religion. It reflects a heart that is open, teachable, and responsive. God chooses women who are willing to listen because listening leads to obedience, and obedience releases impact. Her awareness of his presence becomes the foundation upon which her faith stands, guiding her steps and anchoring her soul through every season of life. One of the most challenging yet transformative experiences in the life of a woman chosen by God is separation and isolation. This season often arrives without warning and rarely comes with clear explanations. Relationships that once felt secure begin to fade, familiar environments no longer fit, and the sense of belonging she once relied on begins to shift. This can feel deeply painful, as if she is being stripped of connection and support. Yet in God's design, isolation is not abandonment, it is preparatio. And when God separates a chosen woman, he is protecting what he placed within her. Not everyone who starts the journey with her is meant to finish it. Some relationships are seasonal, and when their purpose is complete, God gently, or sometimes abruptly, removes them. This pruning process can feel like loss, but it creates space for growth. God knows that certain influences, though comfortable, would hinder her development if they remained. Isolation forces a woman to confront herself honestly. Without constant voices around her, she can no longer hide behind approval or distraction. God uses quiet to reveal identity. In solitude, she begins to see who she is, apart from roles, expectations, and validation. This process is uncomfortable because it exposes insecurity and fear, but it is necessary. God builds strong foundations in private before he trusts public responsibility. During separation, the chosen woman learns to depend on God in a deeper way. She realizes that people cannot fulfill needs that only God was meant to fill. This realization shifts her source of confidence. Instead of drawing strength from affirmation, she learns to draw it from God's presence. This dependency strengthens her faith and stabilizes her identity. When God becomes her anchor, loneliness loses its power to define her. Isolation also refines her discernment. Without external pressure, she learns to listen more clearly to God's voice. She becomes more intentional about her choices, values, and boundaries. This clarity protects her from returning to unhealthy patterns or relationships. God uses distance to bring understanding. What once confused her begins to make sense when she sees it from soulates without intention, and he never isolates permanently. When the season shifts, the chosen woman emerges with clarity, strength, and discernment. She carries a deeper relationship with God and a clearer understanding of her purpose. The loneliness that once hurt her becomes a testimony of God's faithfulness. In the end, separation and isolation are not signs that a woman is unloved or forgotten. They are evidence that God is carefully preparing her. What feels like distance is actually divine focus. God sets apart the women he intends to use, shaping them in private so they can stand firm in public. Isolation is not the loss of connection. It is the birthplace of calling, identity, and spiritual authority. When a woman is chosen by God, her life gradually becomes more than a personal journey. It becomes a testimony. Every experience she walks through, both painful and joyful, begins to carry meaning beyond herself. God does not allow her to endure hardship simply for survival. He redeems her story so it can bring hope, healing, and direction to others. What once felt like senseless suffering becomes a powerful witness of God's faithfulness. A chosen woman often notices that people are drawn to her without her trying to attract attention. They come to her with questions, burdens, and stories they rarely share elsewhere. This is not because she has all the answers, but because her life carries authenticity. She speaks from experience, not theory. Her words carry weight because they are shaped by endurance. God uses her journey to build trust in others, creating space for her testimony to impact hearts. Her testimony is not always delivered from a stage or a platform. Often it is shared in quiet conversations, in moments of vulnerability, and through the way she lives her life. People watch how she responds to difficulty, how she handles disappointment, and how she maintains faith when circumstances are unclear. Her consistency speaks louder than declarations. God uses her daily faithfulness as evidence that his grace is real and sustaining. Pain plays a significant role in shaping her testimony. The wounds she once tried to hide become places where God's healing power is most visible. A chosen woman learns that her scars do not disqualify her. They qualify her to minister with compassion. She understands pain in others because she has known it herself. This shared understanding creates connection and trust. God uses what hurt her to heal someone else. There are moments when carrying a testimony feels heavy. A chosen woman often feels a strong sense of responsibility toward others. She wants to help, encourage, and uplift, sometimes at the cost of her own rest. God gently teaches her that she is not responsible for saving anyone. Her role is to be faithful, not to carry burdens that belong to Him. Learning this balance is essential to sustaining her calling without burning out. As her testimony grows, God teaches her humility. She understands that her story is not about her strength, but about God's grace. She resists the temptation to present herself as flawless or complete. Instead, she shares honestly, allowing God to be glorified through her imperfection. This authenticity makes her testimony powerful because it points others to God rather than herself. Her life experiences also teach her discernment. She learns when to speak and when to remain silent. Not every moment requires sharing, and not every audience is prepared to receive her story. God guides her in timing, ensuring that her testimony is released where it will bear fruit. This wisdom protects her heart and preserves the sacredness of her journey. A chosen woman's testimony often extends beyond words into action. Her compassion moves her to serve, to pray, and to support others through difficult seasons. She becomes a safe place for those who feel unseen or unheard. God uses her presence to remind others that hope is possible. Her life becomes living proof that God restores, strengthens, and redeems. Over time, she begins to see how intricately God has woven her story together. Events that once seemed disconnected now reveal a pattern of purpose. Each chapter prepared her for the next, equipping her to relate to people from different backgrounds and struggles. God used every season, loss, waiting, joy, and breakthrough to shape a testimony that carries depth and authenticity. In the end, a chosen woman realizes that her testimony is not about the absence of struggle, but about the presence of God within it. Her life stands as evidence that God walks with His chosen ones through every valley. She understands that sharing her story is an act of obedience and service. By allowing God to use her experiences, she turns personal pain into collective hope. Her life becomes a reminder that God does not waste suffering, and through Him, every story can become a source of light for others. When a woman is chosen by God, divine favor begins to appear in her life in ways that cannot be explained by effort alone. Doors open that she did not force. Protection surrounds her in moments where things could have gone wrong. Opportunities align at unexpected times. Yet this favor is often misunderstood. It is not a reward for perfection, nor is it a shortcut around hardship. God's favor is entrusted, not earned, and is always accompanied by responsibility. A chosen woman learns early that favor does not remove struggle. She may still face delays, opposition, and moments of uncertainty. The difference is that even in difficulty, God is actively positioning her. What looks like a setback often becomes redirection. When one door closes, another opens in a way that reveals God's hand. Favor works quietly, rearranging circumstances to protect her purpose and guide her steps. God releases favor where there is obedience. A chosen woman's willingness to follow God, even when it costs her comfort, invites His blessing. Obedience requires trust, especially when the outcome is unclear. She learns that God honors surrender more than strategy. Favor flows from alignment, not ambition. When she prioritizes God's will over her own desires, doors begin to open that no amount of striving could unlock. With favor comes influence, and with influence comes accountability. God does not elevate a woman simply to bless her. He elevates her so she can bless others. A chosen woman becomes aware that her decisions affect more than just herself. She carries a sense of stewardship over the opportunities God places in her life. This awareness shapes her character. She becomes careful with her words, actions, and attitudes, knowing that her life reflects God's work. Humility becomes essential in seasons of favor. A chosen woman understands that what she has received is not proof of superiority, but evidence of grace. She resists pride because she knows favor can never be sustained without humility. God continues to shape her heart, reminding her that success without surrender leads to emptiness. Favor remains where gratitude and obedience reside. Responsibility also reveals itself in how she handles visibility. When God places her in positions of influence, she learns to remain grounded. She remembers the seasons of isolation and pressure that prepared her for this moment. Those memories keep her dependent on God rather than applause. She understands that visibility increases vulnerability, and only a heart anchored in God can withstand it. At times, favor attracts misunderstanding and jealousy. Others may question why opportunities seem to follow her or why she is trusted with responsibility. This can be painful, especially when it comes from those she once stood beside. God teaches her not to defend herself unnecessarily. Favor speaks for itself. Her role is to remain faithful, allowing God to validate what he's established. A chosen woman also learns that favor requires discipline. God's blessings demand wise stewardship. Whether it is influence, resources, or relationships, she learns to manage them with integrity. Favor without discipline can become a burden rather than a blessing. God trains her to handle success with the same faithfulness she showed in obscurity. As she matures, she recognizes that favor is not constant elevation. Sometimes it is restraint. God may withhold opportunities that appear attractive but would compromise her calling. She learns to trust that God's no is as protective as his yes. True favor aligns her with God's timing, not her impatience. In the end, divine favor confirms that God is actively involved in her journey. It reassures her that obedience is never wasted. Yet, she understands that favor is not the destination, it is a tool. God uses it to position her for impact, service, and influence. A woman chosen by God carries favor not for her own glory, but so God's purpose can be fulfilled through her life. Being chosen by God is not a momentary experience. It is a lifelong journey of surrender, obedience, and service. Over time, a woman begins to understand that her calling is not something she visits occasionally, but something she lives daily. God does not choose women for short assignments. He chooses them for a walk that unfolds season by season. This journey requires continual surrender because every new level of purpose demands a deeper yielding of the heart. At first, surrender feels like loss. A chosen woman may feel as though she is constantly laying things down, plans, expectations, or relationships, even versions of herself she once loved. But surrender is not about losing identity. It is about discovering it. Each time she releases control, God reveals more of who she truly is. She learns that holding tightly to her own will limits her growth, while trusting God's will expands her life beyond imagination. Service becomes the natural expression of her surrender. A chosen woman does not serve to be seen. She serves because love compels her. Her obedience flows from relationship, not obligation. She understands that greatness in God's kingdom is measured by faithfulness, not fame. Whether her service is visible or hidden, she carries it with humility, knowing that God sees what others overlook. As the journey continues, she learns that surrender is not a one-time decision. Each season brings new challenges that require renewed trust. There are moments when fear resurfaces, when uncertainty shakes her confidence. Yet she has learned that surrender is the safest place to be. Letting go no longer terrifies her. Resisting God does. She would rather walk unsure with God than confident without him. Comparison fades as surrender deepens. A chosen woman stops measuring her progress against others. She realizes that every calling is unique, and comparison only distracts from obedience. God never asked her to be like anyone else. He asked her to be faithful. This realization frees her from envy and pressure, allowing her to walk in peace with her own pace and path. Service also reshapes how she views success. Success is no longer about achievement, but alignment. A quiet season spent obeying God becomes as valuable as a public victory. She understands that unseen obedience carries eternal weight. God's approval matters more than applause, and his timing matters more than speed. This mindset guards her heart against burnout and disappointment. As she serves, she becomes a reflection of God's character. Her patience grows, her love deepens, her words become seasoned with wisdom rather than end reaction. People may not always notice immediately, but over time her life speaks clearly. She becomes someone others trust, not because she is perfect, but because she is consistent. Her surrender produces stability, and her service produces impact. There are moments when the journey feels long and tiring. A chosen woman may wonder if her obedience is making a difference. In those moments, God reminds her that impact is not always immediate. Seeds planted in faith often grow quietly before bearing fruit. Her role is not to control outcomes, but to remain faithful. God handles the results. Eventually, she realizes that surrender has transformed her. What once felt like sacrifice now feels like freedom. She no longer fights God's process. She flows with it. Her life becomes a living offering, surrendered daily, guided by faith and anchored in purpose. She understands that being chosen by God is not about reaching a destination, but about walking closely with him through every season. In the end, a woman chosen by God does not just serve God, she reflects him. Her life becomes a testimony of what happens when surrender meets faith. She walks humbly, loves boldly, and trusts deeply. This is the beauty of being chosen, not perfection, but partnership with God in a journey that changes her and everyone she touches. And if this message stirred something deep within you, if you felt seen, strengthened, or reminded of who you truly are, don't let it end here. Stay connected. Subscribe, follow, and walk this journey of faith with us. More words, more truth, more purpose is coming. Because what God is doing in you is only beginning.